An unpleasant silence filled the room, interrupted only by the ticking of the old clock on the wall. Anna, married to Mark for 30 years, sat across from him. He was glued to the TV, as usual, ignoring her presence. Absorbed in her thoughts, she felt the weight of years filled with unspoken grievances and suppressed anger. Anna reached her breaking point. "Did you finish moving?" Mark's voice broke the silence with its typical condescension. Without looking at him, Anna replied, "I'm leaving, Mark." Her voice was calm, but a storm raged inside her. Mark scoffed. "Oh, really? Where will you go, Anna? You can't survive without me." His words hurt, but they also strengthened her determination. Too long had she put up with his dismissive attitude and his mother's constant meddling. It was time she took back her life. "I'll manage," Anna said as she stood up, feeling empowered despite the fear and uncertainty ahead. His mother, who had been living with them for the past year, walked in, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Anna's packed bags. "Running away, are we?" she sneered. "I knew you didn't have the backbone to handle this family." Ignoring her, Anna grabbed her bags and headed toward the door. Mark made no move to stop her. Instead, he called after her. "You'll be back. You need us." As she stepped out of the house, a sense of liberation washed over her. The cool evening breeze was a balm to her suffocated soul. Anna didn't know where she was going, but for the first time in years, she felt a glimmer of hope. For 30 years, she'd been the dutiful wife to Mark, who viewed her more as a convenience than a partner. Their son, Alex, was her only source of joy, but not even he could fill the growing void in her heart. Mark's mother, with her constant criticism and manipulation, only added to the toxic atmosphere in their home. Anna found a small, modest, but peaceful apartment. It was her sanctuary, a place to breathe and think without judgment. In the following days, she ignored the barrage of calls and messages from Mark and his mother. Their communications vacillated between pleading and threats, but Anna was done listening. Her coworkers at the library, where she'd worked part-time for years, supported her. They had noticed the changes in her, the gradual diminishing of her spirit, and now they witnessed her rebirth. One evening, after settling into her new routine, her phone rang. It was Alex. "Mom, are you okay?" His voice was full of concern. "I am, Alex. Better than I've been in years," Anna replied confidently. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Dad and Grandma aren't handling it well. Dad's been drinking, and Grandma won't stop talking about how you've abandoned them." A pang of guilt hit Anna, but she pushed it away. "They'll manage, Alex. They need to learn to respect others." A moment of silence followed. "I'm glad you're finally thinking about yourself, Mom. Let me know if you need anything." As Anna hung up, she realized it was just the beginning. Mark and his mother had underestimated her for years. It was time to show them she was no longer the woman they believed they could control. Her journey of self-discovery and independence had only just begun. In her small apartment, surrounded by the few belongings she had taken with her, Anna reflected on the past 30 years. During the years we were married, the hopeful future that Mark and I envisioned gradually crumbled into a mere shadow of its potential. Our journey began with blissfulness. Mark was attentive and charming, and we were both young and full of dreams. However, over time, the allure diminished, revealing a man more focused on his needs than those of our family. When Alex, our child, was born, I hoped it would bring us together, but instead, it accentuated our differences. Mark viewed parenting as strictly financial support, leaving the emotional nurturing entirely to me. Meanwhile, his mother, Eleanor, was always in the background, her criticism of my parenting a constant irritant. "Anna, you're coddling the boy too much," she would often say, comparing him to Mark, who she claimed never needed such attention. I tolerated her snide remarks, directed my attention towards Alex, and raised him into a thoughtful and independent young man, despite the domestic tensions. The situation reached a turning point when Eleanor moved in with us, without any discussion. One day, I simply came home to find her belongings in the hallway. "My house is too lonely," she said with a manipulative glint in her eye. Living under the same roof with Eleanor was suffocating. She criticized everything from my culinary skills to my dressing sense, often insinuating that Mark could have done much better than me. The ultimate betrayal came when I discovered Mark's deceit through our bank statements, revealing substantial withdrawals made to support Eleanor's gambling and Mark's secret indulgences. Confronting them led to heated arguments, with Mark invariably siding with his mother, dismissing my worries by asserting, "She's my mother, Anna. She uses this to cope with loneliness." The final nail in the coffin was overhearing their conversation, plotting to seize total control of the finances, reducing me to a mere occupant in their house. Realizing I could no longer live in such a shadow, I made the decision to leave, vowing that they would someday understand the pain they had caused. My plan was simple yet effective. Hit them where it hurt the most, their pride and finances. I began by legally separating our finances, a move that shocked Mark. "What do you think you're doing?" he yelled over the phone. "Protecting myself, something I should have done years ago," I replied, my voice calm yet resolute. Eleanor's reaction was even more dramatic. "You ungrateful wretch. After everything we've done for you," she screeched, but I was indifferent. The years of submission were over. I was now setting the rules. This marked only the beginning of their reckoning. The weeks following my move towards financial independence were tumultuous, with Mark and Eleanor livid, their true characters surfacing in their wrath. I received numerous calls, each more vindictive than the last. "You think you're clever, Anna?" Mark hissed during one call. "You're nothing without me. You'll come crawling back." "I won't, Mark. I'm done being your puppet," I replied, my newfound strength emboldening my words. Eleanor was even more caustic. "You'll regret this, Anna. You've ruined our family." "There was no family to ruin, Eleanor. It was an illusion," I retorted. Despite their threats, I felt liberated. The fear that once shackled me dissipated, replaced by a firm resolve for justice. It was time for them to face the repercussions of their actions. I began reaching out to old friends and acquaintances, sharing my story. The truth about our relationship, the reputations of Mark and Eleanor rapidly deteriorated as their manipulations and financial deceit became public. Shocked by the blow to his social status, Mark demanded during a rare direct confrontation, "How could you do this to me?" To this, I calmly replied, "I'm merely highlighting what you've done to yourself." Eleanor, facing the same community backlash, was equally distressed. "You've turned everyone against us. This is war, Anna," she declared. Yet, I remained unperturbed by her threats. "No, Eleanor, this is justice," I responded, watching as their carefully constructed world began to crumble. Mark's friends began to keep their distance, wary of his now tarnished reputation. The once vibrant social circle of Eleanor shrank as word of her manipulations and gambling spread. Aware of their financial vulnerabilities, I took action. With legal assistance, I initiated the process to claim my portion of our shared assets, ensuring Eleanor's gambling debts were exposed alongside Mark's financial mismanagement. Despite the grueling court proceedings, I stood firm. Their attempts to undermine me were ineffective against the weight of truth. The judge ruled in my favor, awarding me a substantial share of the assets. I saw the light fade in Mark and Eleanor's eyes, recognizing that this victory was not merely legal but moral. "You've destroyed us, Anna," Mark admitted, a shadow of his once arrogant self. "No, Mark," I said. "You destroyed us long ago. I'm simply gathering the pieces." Walking out of the courtroom, I felt relief, looking forward to a future unshackled from my past. The aftermath of the court's decision was chaotic. With my rightful share secured, I started to rebuild a life independent of Mark and Eleanor's influence. Their reactions, a mix of disbelief and anger, were evident in phone calls and encounters. "You can't do this to us, Anna," Mark pleaded one evening. "I've only reclaimed what's rightfully mine," I asserted, urging him to have considered the repercussions of his betrayal. Eleanor's underhanded efforts to rally family support, portraying herself as a victim, proved futile. During an unexpected meeting at the grocery store, she accused, "Anna, you're tearing this family apart." Unyielding, I retorted, "This family was broken long before I left." Relishing newfound freedom, I changed my phone number, severing their avenues of harassment. Volunteering at a local shelter, I found solace while assisting others who had encountered similar hardships. Yet, my quest for justice continued as I discovered Eleanor intended to contest the court ruling, hoping to recover the money for her gambling addiction. "You won't get away with this, Anna. I'll make sure of it," she threatened through a relative's message. In response, I strengthened my legal defenses, ready to counter any move she might make. I was no longer the woman who shied away from confrontations. I was a fighter, determined to protect what was rightfully mine. Meanwhile, Mark was slowly unraveling. Mark's once flawless image became tarnished, leading to a decline in his career. The friends and connections he once treasured were now distancing themselves from him, unwilling to associate with someone embroiled in a scandal. "You've ruined me, Anna," he lamented during a rare moment of reflection. "You ruined yourself, Mark. I merely exposed the truth," I responded. As weeks turned into months, I watched their previously secure world crumble. Eleanor's attempt to challenge the court's decision failed dismally, leaving her both financially and socially bankrupt. Mark's career continued its downward trajectory, his reputation permanently tainted. Despite their downfall, I did not find happiness in their suffering. It was a necessary part of my journey towards freedom, but not its completion. I regained my independence and dignity, yet I was still healing from years of neglect and emotional abuse. As I rebuilt my life, I concentrated on achieving inner peace and happiness. Emerging stronger and more resilient, my story was one of liberation, not revenge, a testament to the strength of the human spirit amid adversity. Months had passed since the court's decision, yet the impact of my actions was still felt. Mark and Eleanor, now distanced from most of their acquaintances, lived a mere shadow of their past. One day, Alex visited unexpectedly, looking troubled, his bright eyes clouded with concern. "Mom, I just came from seeing Dad and Grandma," he began, his voice heavy. "They're not doing well." Offering him a seat and a warm cup of tea, I asked, "Tell me what happened." Alex sighed deeply before continuing. "Dad's lost his job, and his drinking has worsened. Grandma has lost everything to gambling. They're selling the house." Hearing this, my heart ached for Alex. Despite everything, they were still his family. "Mom, did we go too far?" he whispered. "Alex, we stood up for what's right. They made their choices," I replied, my voice tinged with sadness. The news of their misfortune brought me no joy. It served as a sober reminder of the consequences of a life lived without integrity and respect for others. The following weeks were filled with whispers and rumors. Mark and Eleanor's home, once a symbol of their success, was now on the market, their fall from grace complete. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Mark had tried to find work, but his reputation preceded him. Eleanor, meanwhile, had become a pariah in her social circles, her gambling addiction now public knowledge. One evening during a walk, I saw Mark. He was a shadow of his former self, his posture slumped and his eyes hollow. Our paths crossed, and for a moment, we stood in silence. "Anna, he began, his voice cracking. "There's nothing to say, Mark," I interrupted. "You chose your path." He nodded slowly, resignation in his eyes. "I never thought it would come to this," he murmured. As I walked away, leaving Mark behind, I felt a sense of closure. The man who once held so much power over me was now just a stranger with a broken past. Eleanor, too, faded into obscurity, her once lively demeanor now subdued as the reality of her actions caught up to her. As the chapter of Mark and Eleanor closed, I focused on my new beginning. As I sat in my cozy living room on a fine autumn day, the sunlight pouring in through the windows, I was reminded of all the changes that had transpired in my life. Months had turned into a year since I began this journey of self-transformation, each day unveiling new strengths and insights. My path had been about more than merely seeking revenge. It was about reclaiming my life and finding peace. It wasn't the fall of Mark and Eleanor that was my ultimate goal. It was just a side effect of my quest for justice and self-respect. I confronted my oppressors not out of a desire for vengeance, but to stand up for justice and personal dignity. With each step forward in my new life, I embraced newfound strength and a readiness for the future. While reflecting, the phone rang, bringing me back from my thoughts. It was Alex, his voice effervescent with excitement. "Mom, Sarah and I are getting married, and we would love your help with the planning," he shared. Joy overflowed in my heart, contrasting the past conversations full of despair. "That's fantastic news, Alex. I'd be delighted to help." Our chat was vibrant with laughter and plans. A few days after, I bumped into Eleanor during one of my usual walks. There was a noticeable diminishment about her, and when our eyes met, there was a glimmer of regret in hers. "Anna," she started with a tremulous voice, I'm sorry." The delayed apology caught me by surprise. "Eleanor, your actions brought you here. I hope you find some peace," I replied before continuing on my way. It was in that moment that I realized just how much I'd changed. I no longer felt anger or held on to resentment. I had transcended beyond the desire for revenge. Planning for the wedding with Alex and Sarah became a joyful endeavor, surrounded by love and optimism. It made me truly appreciate the beauty of progress. On the wedding day, a ceremony filled with happiness and joyful tears, watching Alex and Sarah full of hope, I felt a sense of pride. Despite the hurdles faced, we emerged stronger. In my toast, I shared, "Life is filled with challenges, but it's our response that defines us." Today, we celebrate love, resilience, and new beginnings. As the evening wrapped up, I observed the joy around me, feeling content. I hadn't just survived. I had thrived. In the subsequent years, Mark and Eleanor faded into distant memories. I learned they'd relocated, each dealing with their burdens. My life, once overshadowed by their influence, became truly mine. I discovered fulfillment in my career, joy in my role as a mother and friend, and serenity in solitary moments. While sitting in my garden one sunny afternoon, observing the blooming flowers, I realized this was true freedom. The journey, filled with challenges, led me to a place of contentment and strength. The end of my marriage was not my story's conclusion. It was the start of a new chapter, one where I authored my own narrative. In this new chapter, I found happiness, peace, and a self-assuredness that no one could ever take away.